Can a presidential candidate actually be found guilty of, well, nothing more than just running for president?
That question really cuts to the heart of what we're seeing right now. It's pretty unprecedented in American legal history.
Yeah.
We're witnessing this incredibly aggressive prosecution, multiple jurisdictions targeting a former leader. And critics, they argue it's not about real accountability, it's political annihilation.
Okay, let's dive right into that. Our mission today, for you listening, is a deep dive into the source material, looking at this legal and political targeting.
Sure.
We're specifically viewing it through the conservative lens, which frames these actions as political persecution.
Right.
And we'll also analyze the fallout, how this whole battle is affecting the judicial system, fracturing it, and maybe, surprisingly, how the public is actually reacting, or maybe not reacting.
And the scale, the sheer scale is what really sets the tone here. Sources keep pointing this out. The former leader is facing a staggering 91 indictments, multiple states involved.
91.
Yeah, and one analysis we saw really puts it in perspective. It noted this is 10 times the charges someone like Charles Manson faced.
Wow. That comparison, 91 charges versus 10 for Manson, that really drives home the perception of political motive, at least from the conservative viewpoint these sources describe.
It's absolutely intended to. The accusation you see in these sources is outright collusion. Federal, state, local levels all working together.
Collusion.
That's the term used. And the alleged goal is explicit: to destroy a man, to make this whole thing an existential event for him financially. That's really the starting point for the narrative we're examining.
And it's fascinating because this intense pressure, it's causing waves far beyond just the campaign.
Yeah.
Your sources point to these deep cracks inside the Department of Justice itself.
That's right. You have conservative legal figures heading for the exits, citing a fundamental conflict over the rule of law. Plus, we've got some really, really surprising data on how everyday people are actually processing all this legal drama, or maybe how they aren't.
Okay, let's start with that central complaint then. The sheer number, the nature of these challenges against the leader. Critics see the scale itself as proof this is an attack on democracy, not a defense of it.
That's the accusation, plain and simple. The main argument is that his only real crime he's guilty of is running for president. Meaning the charges are completely tied to his political ambitions. If he just decided to retire, play golf, poof, the cases would disappear. That's the claim.
And back to that number.
91 indictments.
Yeah.
When you hear that put next to historical criminal cases, the message being sent is one of extreme, targeted political action.
And the sources we reviewed don't just talk about numbers. They point fingers at specific officials, suggesting personal bias, particularly in New York.
Exactly. There's rhetoric cited from the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, that critics say just screams open partisanship.
Like what?
Well, James reportedly quipped about looking out her office window towards the former leader's 40 Wall Street building every single day. Critics jump on that, saying, look, this kind of personalized, openly partisan approach, it's an outrage, it should disqualify her. It makes it look less like law enforcement, more like political payback.
And that payback, if you follow the critics' framing, comes with a really steep price. These New York civil cases especially seem designed to be a kind of financial weapon.
Oh, absolutely. The sources are very clear. The total potential penalty, with that initial $454 million judgment, it makes this an existential event for him financially.
Existential. That's a strong word.
It is. It's not just a big fine. It's portrayed as a sustained economic attack. And the interest alone, if you zoom in on that, the initial judgment was calculated to rack up about $112,000 per day. Per day. It's almost hard to wrap your head around a number like that. Critics say it's like a running clock designed specifically to drain his resources, neutralize him politically.
So, faced with that kind of pressure, did the sources indicate any counter moves from the administration side?
Yes, they did. Sources mentioned the Department of Justice launching its own criminal investigation into NY Attorney General Letitia James.
Interesting.
And there were also specific moves regarding appointments. The administration installed a Lebanese American to temporarily lead the federal prosecution office in Washington, D.C. These personnel shifts happened right alongside these big legal fights.
Okay, so this isn't just playing out in the courts and in finances. It's actually tearing at the fabric of the judicial system itself. Let's shift to that turmoil you mentioned inside the Justice Department.
Yeah, this is really where the rubber meets the road on what rule of law even means anymore. Sources detail this deep unrest after a directive came down to drop the corruption case against Adams.
Adams, the Democrat, who had seemed maybe sympathetic to the administration.
That's the one. And the reaction from the career prosecutors was immediate and pretty dramatic.
How so?
At least half a dozen DOJ employees reportedly resigned, just walked out over that one instruction. And sources name names. Two key figures, known conservative legal minds. Sassoon, who was the acting U.S. attorney in Manhattan, 38 years old, Federalist Society member. And Hagan-Scotton, who clerked for Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh. Serious conservative credentials.
So you have a fundamental clash here.
Yeah.
Sassoon's take was basically about prosecutorial independence, right?
Yeah.
That you have to pursue a valid case.
Regardless whether its dismissal would be politically advantageous. That was his stated principle. You follow the law, not the politics.
But the administration's response, according to the sources,
Was forceful. Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove argued these prosecutors who resigned. They actually violated their oaths of office.
violated their oaths.
How? By not following orders. Bove's quote is pretty stark. In no valid sense do you uphold the Constitution by disobeying direct orders implementing the policy of a duly elected president.
That's a very different definition of rule of law. If the highest duty is just obedience to the executive, doesn't that challenge the whole idea of an independent judiciary? How did legal scholars react?
That's precisely the fear these sources highlight. Ilya Somin, a libertarian legal scholar, also Federalist Society, doesn't see this as just a policy spat. He calls it a dangerous precedent.
Dangerous.
He suggests it shows a shift in conservative legal thinking, maybe less regard for the Constitution, prioritizing other considerations over those core rule of law values. And it wasn't subtle. The administration's pick for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, reportedly said flat out, DOJ lawyers who won't push the administration's arguments could be fired.
That sounds less like a difference of legal opinion and more like, well, like intimidation.
That's certainly how those who resigned seem to have perceived it. And Bove didn't stop there. He actually referred Sassoon, Scotton, and another prosecutor for internal investigations, possible misconduct.
Sending a message?
Exactly. A former federal prosecutor quoted in the sources said these referrals basically tell everyone still at DOJ, you're under the thumb of Bove, don't follow his exact wishes, you'll be punished. The whole situation got so tense, it actually drew comparisons to the Saturday Night Massacre back in 1973, which, tells you just how serious this crisis over judicial independence was seen to be.
Okay, so while the legal system is showing these really deep cracks, how is the public actually reacting to all this unprecedented legal spectacle? You mentioned a survey experiment.
Yes, and this is where things get, frankly, quite surprising, especially when you link all the political and judicial drama back to the voters. Researchers did this survey experiment, about 3,000 people, all self-identified Republicans and independents.
And they tested how different messages affected them.
Right. They tested the impact of rhetoric coming from the leader himself versus rhetoric from the federal prosecutor involved, Jack Smith.
And the big headline finding was?
That elite rhetoric doesn't matter if it's from the leader or the prosecutor. It has strikingly limited effects on public opinion.
Limited effects after all this.
Strikingly limited. The researchers suggest it's because voters already have what they call strong priors, pre-existing beliefs.
So people have already made up their minds. They're either firmly for him or firmly against him, and nothing, not charges, not rhetoric, is really moving the needle.
That seems to be the implication. Even the leader's own pretty fiery partisan attacks on the prosecution, they didn't really boost his support much more among his base.
Why not?
The research suggests it's because his supporters have heard it all before. They've already been exposed to that kind of rhetoric, so it's just, background noise at this point.
Okay, but what about the other side? The messages from the federal prosecutor, Jack Smith. Did his more legalistic arguments, presumably aimed at establishing legitimacy, did they sway anyone?
They did have a very slight effect on voting intention, but here's the kicker. They caused a major backlash.
A backlash? How?
So the legal arguments from Smith did slightly reduce voting intention for the leader, but only among people who were already somewhat unfavorable towards him to begin with. It didn't touch the core base. But crucially, that same attempt to sound objective and legalistic, it triggered a sharp backlash against the prosecutor himself among the leader's actual supporters.
So the effort to seem nonpartisan and just focus on the law actually made the prosecutor the target for the leader's base.
That's the paradox the experiment revealed. And remember, the study found that initially almost half the respondents, 46%, didn't even know who Jack Smith was.
Wow.
His attempt at nonpartisan accountability basically just raised his profile enough for him to become a new partisan punching bag for people who already supported the leader.
Okay, so let's try and tie all these threads together. We have this unprecedented legal onslaught, a judicial system seemingly fracturing over the very meaning of the rule of law, and then public opinion that seems remarkably resistant to it all. What does it all mean?
Well, it paints a picture of really deep tension, doesn't it? You've got this massive legal machinery mobilized against one political figure. Critics frame it as political and financial destruction. That process then forces this internal crisis within the justice system itself. Is the rule of law about impartial enforcement, or is it about obedience to the current administration? A fundamental conflict.
And yet somehow the public seems almost walled off from this chaos. The messaging, whether it's fiery partisan attacks or careful legal arguments, it just seems to bounce off these pre-existing beliefs.
Yeah.
People have, it seems, already picked their side.
Exactly. The view seems cemented regardless of the 91 indictments or the internal DOJ meltdown.
So that leaves us with a final thought, maybe a challenging one for you listening.
If this huge, highly publicized legal effort, supposedly meant to ensure accountability, actually just deepens the partisan trenches and even creates this sharp backlash against the nonpartisan officials trying to do their jobs,
Then what's really left to the whole idea of nonpartisan accountability when politics are this polarized?
it suggests that maybe, just maybe, in the court of public opinion today, the verdict is already in long before the first indictment is even handed down.